Hi there, and welcome to Master of Horror, where I bring you the scariest true paranormal stories I have ever come by. These are 3 true scary paranormal stories with thunderstorm sounds. Number 45. Scary true horror story number 1. The Garage Entity. This took place about 10 years ago with me and my friends on the night of my 14th birthday party sleepover, but I still can't forget it. So my parents had a garage on our property that they had partly renovated. It had walls and bathroom, but still had the garage door that rolled up, which wasn't completely sealed. There weren't many curtains on the windows. Our property wasn't totally isolated, but the nearest neighbor was nearly 4 miles away. We never had any problems on our street, and it was the kind of place that you didn't need to lock your doors. So the day of my birthday party comes, but up until this point, my parents had to let my older brother stay in the garage, and I wasn't allowed to have any friends sleep there overnight. I begged my parents to let us have the sleepover in the garage, even though my mom was unsure, but my dad agreed, since it was my birthday. After a long day filled with sugar and driving my parents crazy, we finally got ready for the sleepover in the garage, but we had strict instructions to go to bed and turn off the lights by 11 o'clock p.m., and it was my responsibility to make sure the garage door was locked from the inside. I made sure to lock the door and settled in for the night. At 11 o'clock p.m. we turned off the lights but couldn't sleep. So that's when we decided to play hide and seek with the lights off, like teenagers do. We were about 3 rounds in, and my best friend was the one looking for us. I was hiding behind a dresser next to the garage door, but when the first person got caught, I heard giggling coming from behind me. At first, I thought it was an echo because there was no way someone could have found a hiding place behind me with me up against the wall in the garage door. The second person was caught, and there was more giggling from behind me. Now I was freaking out, but I didn't want to ruin the game, so I quietly moved to a different spot facing one of the windows. It was pretty dark outside, but the moon was bright enough to see shadows inside the garage. It was completely dark, and I was trying not to get caught when I saw a shadow pass by the window and stop. Now, I was sure someone was outside, but I thought it might be my dad or my older brother checking if we were in bed, so I froze. My best friend ran straight into me and started laughing. I quickly shushed her and said, "My dad's outside. We need to go back into bed." So we quietly grabbed the other girls and quietly got back into our beds, thinking we had avoided getting into trouble. When we didn't hear my dad saying anything, I turned over in my bed, but the shadow was still there. It looked as if it was in the garage. By this time, I was really freaking out. The shadow moved away, then there was scratching on the garage door. It was coming from inside the garage. This time the other girls noticed. We all started quietly panicking and got into my bed, hoping whatever it was would just go away, or that we were just imagining things because of all the sweets that we ate that night. We were freaking out but didn't scream. I had just gotten a phone for my birthday, but it was still in the house with the other presents. With no way to quietly call my parents, we asked whatever it was to please go away. Then we heard something crawling on the ground around us. There is no carpet in the garage, just concrete, so it was very noticeable that something was crawling on the ground. It was a scraping noise, like it had claws or nails. We all heard this. I covered my face with the blanket, and so did my friends. We then decided on the count of 3 to get up and run out of the garage into the house. As soon as we got up, we rushed out of the garage and yelled for my dad. My dad and older brother went into the garage and saw that nothing was there. We slept in my parents' room that night. It was another 3 years until I finally slept in that garage alone. Scary, true paranormal story number 2. So, about 15 years ago, I was living with my ex-girlfriend and her sister. The house was not far from town. Within the first few weeks of living there, strange things were happening regularly. Lights going out randomly and noises upstairs as if somebody was walking around and sometimes even running. Things got pretty severe as time went on. 1 week in particular was the most terrifying. The first thing that happened that week was on a Tuesday night. Everyone was working and I was home alone watching television, and our cat was acting really weird, backing into a corner, and its back was arched up like it was scared. When I went to get up and see why my cat was doing this, the electricity went out in the house and it was pitch black inside. The second thing that happened is I heard really loud footsteps running down the stairs towards me. I got up and braced myself for whatever it was, but there was nothing. I mustered up the courage and went outside to the front garden to check if other houses' lights were out, but my house was the only one that was dark. I went to the fuse box and reset the trip switch, and all was back to normal. A few days later, I think on a Thursday, we were all in the living room watching a movie, eating pizza. The lights were on, and it was a good atmosphere in the house. Then, out of nowhere, a massive bang was heard upstairs, as if something huge fell to the ground. We got up to check it out, and I went into our bedroom and saw my bedside table in the middle of the room. The worst and last thing that happened to me was on a Saturday night, and I'll never forget this, and it still gives me the chills when I think about it. We go to bed. Everything is normal. I watch a bit of a movie and fall asleep. I wake up facing the wall and glance at the alarm clock. It reads 3:33 a.m. I turn over to go back to sleep and see my ex standing in the middle of the room. Confused, I begin to sit up and ask her what's going on. But as I start to sit up, I realized my ex is asleep in the bed next to me. So fear then runs through me, and I'm frozen on the spot. My eyes adjust, and I barely make out the figure of a young girl in a nightdress. She's soaking wet with her head looking down at the floor. I can hear the water drops on the carpet, and I'm just sitting there completely shocked. I couldn't believe it. After a couple of seconds, it melts away. It fades out of sight. I got up and turned the lights on and tried to tell myself that it was just a nightmare. But the problem was, there was a wet patch of water exactly where she was standing. We moved out shortly after that, and I can still picture her to this day, though it's the creepiest thing I've ever experienced. True, scary, paranormal story number 3. I believe this was in July or August of 2018. My husband and 3 daughters and I were at the beach having a get-together with some of my extended family who lived in the area. It was a really nice time and good to connect with everyone, but after a couple of hours, my second oldest, age 13 at the time, came up to me and asked if I could take her home. I could tell by her expression and tone that she was pretty tired. I myself was also getting really tired. So I found my husband and let him know that I was going to take her home and to let our other girls know. She and I got in the car. My husband brought his own car to the beach, so they were going to come home later. It was only once we parked up onto the porch and I jiggled the handle to the door when we realized it was locked and we didn't have a key. My husband had the main key, so I told my daughter to go around the back to try and climb through the huge window above the kitchen sink. While she was making her way around the house, I tried calling my husband just in case she couldn't get in, but he didn't pick up the phone. I was in the middle of trying to call my husband a second time when I looked through the window next to the front door, which allows you to see through to the kitchen and the back door, and saw my daughter standing in the kitchen doorway. It was dark, but I could see her standing there looking down at the kitchen table. I know my daughter, she's quite short like me and has a very petite figure like my mom, so I could recognize her from miles away. "Great job," I remember calling out. "Come on now, unlock the door." She raised her head and turned it towards me and looked right at me. I called out again, "Come, unlock the door," but she didn't move. By the way she was standing, I could tell that she was staring right at me, but she didn't move a muscle. At first I thought maybe she was on her phone or something, but I could clearly see her arms on either side of her. She was standing in a very weird position as well. Her feet were a good distance apart, and her arms were slightly raised from her sides. I didn't feel uneasy yet, but I was very confused. We continued to stare at each other for several more seconds. "Lily," I remember saying her name again. No more than 5 seconds after that, my daughter came jogging out from the side of the house and up the steps, telling me she couldn't get inside the house because there was a screen on the window. I stared at my daughter for a moment with what must have been a very terrified expression because her face instantly looked concerned. She asked me if everything was okay. I couldn't answer, and I remember feeling my whole body starting to shake. I looked back through the window, and this thing was now in the living room, still standing in that weird position and staring right at me. Fear and adrenaline shot through my veins in a way only a mother can know, and I practically yanked my daughter from those steps and ran to the neighbor's house to get a spare key. Whatever was in my house was gone by the time we returned, or at least out of sight from the window. However, I did not let my daughter leave the neighbor's house until I inspected every inch to make sure that there was no intruder. The human brain automatically tries to give everything a logical explanation. So the more I thought about it, the more I was feeling like it had been imagined. But I eventually chopped it up to being exhausted or whatever, because honestly, what else could it have been? I didn't tell my daughter about my experience. I didn't want to scare her. To this day, when I think about what I saw that night, it still torments me. Thank you, my friends, for listening to Master of Horror. If you liked what you've heard, please like and subscribe for more true, scary, paranormal stories with thunderstorm sounds. Okay, my friends, till next time, sleep tight, and don't forget to leave the nightlight on.